Troop 55 Boy Scouts, so it's a great combo. And I would ask at the start of our meeting if you could stand and join in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I have brand new breaking news, which is I was getting text. There was a nail biter for the girls basketball team, but they pulled it from behind victory. They were behind at the end of the third quarter, went on to win. So good for them. Could I get a motion? You know what I want to do actually is just ask that we move our committee reports to after our presentation tonight.
Sure.
And with that, could I get a motion to accept our agenda?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. And with that, we will begin with our district updates. And then we'll have a community comment period. And then tonight we begin our budget process. And we're sure to learn a lot from that.
Sure. Well, good evening, everyone. My report tonight is relatively brief, and because we want to jump right into the other business before us. And certainly the one thing, aside from the congratulations to the basketball team, as Mr. Hanna referenced, is to provide an update regarding athletics and basketball. There's been lots of concern and question related to Section 1 and the decision from the executive committee of Section 1 to move the championships away from the county center. And in doing so, the finals are to be held at Pace University, and there wasn't a clear-cut plan for what would happen with the semifinals. I can tell you that there's a group of administrators and athletic directors that are working diligently at this time to try to find a way to bring the semifinals to the county center. So there's conversations and negotiations that are ongoing, but it's being complicated by the position that Section 1 has taken right now. I would like to say that, we're optimistic, but cautious. If that plan does not see the light that I'm hoping we'll realize, the position of Section 1 right now is that the higher seeds would host for quarterfinals and semis. Quarterfinals aren't a concern because a quarterfinal game would fall during our winter break, and we believe we can accommodate the crowds and the parking. We've done it in the past. The worry lies in and around semifinals and thinking about the ability to be able to safely host and organize an event here in our gym. I do have concerns about seating. You could imagine if we could be hosting a doubleheader, because we have two very good teams, and they could both end up with top seeds. And in doing so, I worry, one, that with our small gym, we wouldn't be able to get all the Irvington spectators in there safely, let alone visiting fans. And then to think about our parking limitations and having to set up shuttle buses and the like. So I don't see hosting as a viable option, so we're really pushing and hoping that we're going to land with an opportunity to have the semis at the county center. More to come on that front. Also, I just wanted to touch base on a couple other items. We're working on developing a district calendar. As many may have heard, that there is a new proposed set of regulations that are designed to simplify what is a very complicated process across the state of New York. And the Board of Regents is planning to accept those at the end of April. And with that said, the model that we're developing and discussing locally not only would comply with the new regulations, but the existing regulations. So we look forward to coming forward in March with a recommendation for the board for chew on. One thing that I think is an important note that when we head into budget, and we'll reference it throughout our process, is that we continue to see strong enrollment. I can remember being in this room probably 4 or 5 years ago, and there was talk about whether we should close Main Street School and which direction enrollment going. And our enrollment in Irvington at this point in time is 9 students greater than it was when we closed in June. And we know we have somewhere between 6 and 10 students that are set to start on our rolls in the coming weeks. So our enrollment remains strong, which leads to not only what a wonderful community Irvington is, but the quality education folks receive here. So, and then finally, just a reminder that we do have our winter recess, and district will be closed 19th through the 23rd.
Excellent. Okay. I mean, I just want to point out, too, I have this excellent new water bottle. I want to mention that I got it along with a number of other people who received similar swag at Dow's Lane and Main Street School this past week. There was the World Read Aloud Day, and it was an amazing event, and I felt just wonderful to be a part of it. I know that some of the board members and administrators, and we had guests from the community and from around the area that came and read books with students. I was in a third grade classroom. It was a great conversation with the students, and so I really am appreciative of all the work that was done by the organizers of the event and everyone who participated. So thank you. And I think some of you are here, so if I could just give you a thank you. So I want to welcome again the faculty members and Troop 55. We have this opportunity to now go into a public comment period. And during that time, anyone who would like to share a comment related typically to the agenda, but obviously we're glad to hear any other thoughts you'd like to share tonight. We ask that you go to the microphone that's at the back of the room. And we ask that in terms of people who would like to speak, that you limit your comments to approximately 3 minutes, and that we ask that you identify yourself. So,
Could I make a suggestion, Mr.
Yes.
President? Could we give Troop 55 first priority if they want?
were there any public comments from Troop 55?
No.
We're thrilled to have you here. It's sometimes there's just a handful of people, so this is a nice change. All right. If there's no one from Troop 55, we'll move on to the adults in the room.
Good evening. My name is Amy Falk, and I serve as president of the Irvington Faculty Association. And I would like to take this opportunity to address a letter that was delivered to me, addressed to me, and that was sent to the, as far as I know, entire school community, and was posted on the district's newsletter and sent out in an email blast. I am assuming that everybody in this room, or that many people in this room at any rate, have seen the letter, as it was widely shared, as I said, via the email blast and forwarded to our members on Friday morning. It's framed as a letter to me in my role as president of the Irvington Faculty Association, but circumstances make it clear that it is nothing more than an attempt to influence the negotiations process. A note on the timeline, I think, makes this clear. I received the letter by hand delivery, by courier, at about noon on Thursday. Within hours, it was shared throughout the community, without my having really a realistic opportunity to respond. So I don't believe that an expected response was really part of the plan, or was really the intention of the letter, was to hear back from the Irvington Faculty Association. What feels really unfair about that is that the letter contains one perspective. And I would like to suggest that the perspective is biased in favor of one side of the contract negotiations process. The letter all by itself would give anyone who reads it a very inaccurate picture of what's transpired thus far in the negotiations process, and I would like to take this opportunity to set the record straight. You see, this letter, while addressed to me personally as though it's a good-natured invitation to reconsider your last proposal, it is clear that it was never meant as that. A careful read of this letter and the circumstances under which it was disseminated throughout the community reveals it for what it is: an attempt to divide our membership, to cause them to lose faith in their leaders, and to discredit us as an association, as a union within the community. The letter is filled with half-truths, deliberately crafted to give the impression that our negotiating team has mishandled the bargaining process and that we are the intractable party. Some specifics. The first issue with your letter is that your direct communication with our members in a blatant attempt to influence their opinion of our position and the work of our bargaining team is a clear violation of the Taylor Law, which, as you know, governs labor management relations in the public sector. In the email to which your letter was attached, you stated, "We hope it provides some insight into the process." The presumption that you're in a position to provide our members with insight
that has somehow been absent, I suppose is the implication, in our communications as the negotiating team of our union, is at best patronizing. Furthermore, your strategic omissions of key details that reflect poorly on your negotiating team are meant to divide our membership and sow discord. Elaine, I have a notice of claim that I would like to serve you with, and this is a document that notifies the district of the Irvington Faculties Association to proceed with a claim of improper practice with the Labor Board. Here's a quote that I think demonstrates what the issue is at hand. The claim of the union is based on the fact that the district interfered with the union's role as the exclusive bargaining agent of the district's professional employees when it directly contacted the union's members by sending them a copy from the Board of Education president to the union president, recommending that the union president accept the district's latest offer in contract negotiations, despite negotiations being at impasse. In so doing, the district has refused to negotiate in good faith with the duly recognized or certified representatives of its public employees in violation of rights guaranteed in Section 202. I'll deliver that to you in just a moment. Elaine, thank you. You may disagree with the IFA's position on the bargaining process, but I don't believe that we have proceeded in bad faith or with a lack of integrity. And this ethical lapse represents a severe breach of trust with the people who work for you. And I would like to suggest that that is no way to lead people or to influence them to see your point of view. And sadly, I cannot say that I didn't anticipate these duplicitous tactics might come. I hoped it would not come to this. We have been warned by multiple sources that Ingerman Smith, along with other law firms that represent school districts in the region, have been routinely advising school boards to get to impasse as quickly as possible, and then to engage in a campaign to discredit the teachers' union and turn the community against them. And this has happened in local districts, as I'm sure you are aware. You see, though it has looked as though some of the lawyers' tactics have been in play, I trusted that this board was sincere in its intention to bargain in good faith. Our team has counted on our longstanding trust and your genuine concern for us, as you have often articulated here in this room. It's very disappointing, and I never thought that I would see the day when this board, who continuously talks about how much you respect and support the teachers in this district, who as individuals you often have personal relationships with that span years, and that you have trusted for all of those years. We have trusted you in turn, and this feels like a breach of that trust. I stand here, I think I'm safe to say, with the full support of our membership behind me. I am not the problem. Our negotiating team is not the problem. Our members are not the problem. We are a vital resource to the Irvington Union Free School District and this community. We are the professionals who care for, educate, and love your children. We continue to be all of those things, but we're devastated that you would treat us this way and that you would not be able to see through the way you're being manipulated. I would just appeal to you to keep in mind that the flow of information has been very tightly controlled. You have heard only very, very limited information from us directly, and we have heard very limited information from you directly. And I think that that really should give you pause. Finally, in your letter, you urged me to reconsider your last proposal. I would like to urge you and the board to take a very careful look at that proposal yourselves. Our bargaining team did, and we found that it contains factual inconsistencies, miscalculations, and that as did the previous proposal that we received, and that you withdrew when we brought those errors to your attention. This entire process has been mishandled from your end, not ours. It's very unfortunate that you made the decision to air all of this in public rather than taking me up on my repeated offers to sit down with us directly and hear from us directly. Moreover, you're playing a dangerous game here. Your attempt to whip up sentiments in the community against us, the teachers, is, as we've seen in other local districts, is very likely to have negative blowback consequences on the school district as a whole. If people in the community believe that the teachers are being unreasonable, all the more likely that they're not going to support our next budget. You're opening Pandora's box, and just like in the mythology, you may not be able to undo the consequences of that. You urged me and our negotiating team to reconsider your last offer. Well, on behalf of the IFA, I would like to say we have considered your last offer, and we said no. It would have delivered our members, teachers at the best district in Westchester for the second year running, increases that would have been paled in comparison to what has been the trend in the region of late. We would like to urge you to come back to the table during mediation with a more complete understanding of what has transpired and with an intention to deal with us fairly and in good faith. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy, thank you. And I think obviously the next step is that we are moving to mediation. And as has been expressed, the board and the negotiating team for the district does seek as well to have a fair and equitable solution that serves you and that serves the district. So we'll continue to have communication as appropriate and as available. We've been there. We want to continue to be there. The door is open. We know that we're starting to set a schedule for that mediation, and we look forward to continuing to work with you to find that solution. So thank you very much. Are there any other comments?
Good evening. My name is Yasena Sorel. I'm a parent of a fourth grader and a first grader in Irvington schools. I hope that this particular issue will get resolved because we have awesome teachers. So hopefully, I'm not getting involved, of course, but I'm here to represent the early world language initiatives, the efforts that the youth witnessed every single BOE meeting. So I'm here to represent all the parents who would like to see the expansion of early world languages in the primary grades. I have several questions towards the budget, or kind of wanted to let you know what we would like to see. First, we would like to see the expansion of the after-school programs and the club's creation. We've heard some positive news that hopefully this is on the way. We hope that things will get approved, and we are looking forward to this cooperation further. Also, we would like to see a creation of a budget line for a foreign language consultant paid to explore expansion of early world language instruction as a FLES program into the primary grades. And we would like to see the FLES program to be implemented in the school year 2020 and 2021. We are aware that a consultant had been used in the past, and we just want to let you know we can also provide a recommendation, somebody recommended very highly professional who would be able to help us also with this particular effort. So these are just the two comments I have tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to hear from our faculty and our community. I would love to just show that first slide real quickly, if that's possible. We're about to start our budget presentation. And, it speaks to the goals that we have in terms of what we're trying to achieve, the balance that we seek to have, a vision of a district that's ever stronger district. And so speaking to some of the comments, we want to continue to support academic and social emotional growth with improving programs, to have safe facilities. We want to have a staff that is supported with high quality professional development and fair contracts. And we want to maintain our fiscal health to keep our budgets under the cap. We did successfully, as one of the only districts, go over the cap once, but that was with 13 votes. So it's a very challenging environment under the new tax levy cap, something that's only been with us for a handful of years. And so we have a balance to keep, and our budget presentation will speak to that today and also next month when we have our subsequent presentations. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Dr. Harrison, and off you go. take a moment? Sure. I saw a board member from Hastings here tonight. We'll try and speak in the microphone so you can watch the video. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll get back to you.
No, please, get out of here if you're sick.
And some people leave, some people come in. All right, we have a fresh audience for the budget presentation. And
Yeah, so good evening and proper welcome to the Scouts, and we talk about a lesson in civics and local government and First Amendment, and a great opportunity for you to participate in the meeting this evening. As Michael so eloquently highlighted before, we have a broad set of responsibilities. We have a broad set of goals for our school district, and they are very holistic. And I'm not going to read through the slide that Michael already spoke to, but it is that well-rounded experience that we're looking for our children, where we provide outstanding learning experiences, that we're doing so in a safe, well-maintained learning spaces that will support and be an asset to learning, not just a place to learn. And very importantly, and I wish more folks had stayed, because we do have a tremendous commitment to our very talented faculty, and we know that without them and their passion, we would not be where we are today. But the challenge that we're going to have through this budget process is one about how we maintain our fiscal health and do so in a sustainable manner. And not only looking at the challenges of tax cap and looking at the need to continue to invest in our facilities, but to how to continue to do more, how to reinvent things that we're doing and do so in a way that will set the district up for a bright, successful future. So in doing so, we have a series of strategic objectives that further delve into what our commitments are as a school district. And they speak to a variety of different things in which I believe everyone in this community would line up behind and support. And that first one talks about our students and the types of experiences we have in the classroom, and want to make sure that our students achieve their very personal best and set them up for success in the future. We want to have innovative environments where there's not only students that are looking to do things differently and create new ideas, but we have teachers that are stepping outside that box of traditional education and provide for those dynamic learning experiences. We want to support the growth of all of our students, and much like my remarks to the Scouts a few moments ago, we want folks to be active participants in their school community and broader society. Our commitment to our staff and professional development remains strong and will continue to be so. But then when we step back, we want to remind ourselves that we're a part of this school community, that we want to make sure that we strengthen our local connections and we have a community that's proud of its schools and that are engaged in our schools. But at the end of the day is that focus, and that focus on maintaining our fiscal health to make sure that we don't find ourselves in a position, whether it's 2 years, 5 years, or 10 years from now, we're not able to make ends meet. And we find ourselves in positions that many other school districts have been in when they're making massive cuts that have impacts directly in the classroom. So as we go through this budget process, we're going to connect our work, our conversations back to these objectives, and the recommendations that come forth will be grounded in these objectives. But we know that, that there'll be challenges along the way. But in doing so, we're going to remain true to where we are. We're going to measure our recommendations and fiscal decisions by our objectives. But when we look at those challenges, some of them can grow locally and others are really handed to us. So when we think about where we sit today and what's happening on Wall Street, what's happening in Washington, D.C., we have to think how that impacts us here in Irvington. So, for example, we think of the new tax law reform or changes, whichever word you choose to use. We're not sure what that impact's going to be. It's going to impact different members of our community very differently, but ultimately it trickles down to our local finances and how folks make ends meet and where they choose to invest their monies. We think about mandates that come down either from Albany or up from Washington, D.C. that impact us and send requirements to schools. We've talked about ENL, English as a New Language, in the past, and it's something that we value. You know, we certainly welcome everybody into our schools, but the state has changed the model and the requirements in which we have to deliver services, but they haven't provided additional assistance. ESSA is the new Federal Education Act, and there are going to be a number of requirements that come down as the state plan is approved and spelled out for local school districts. But again, we're not going to see how that shakes out in our schools. But one clear-cut example of where there are impacts locally is a new requirement to implement a K-12 model of guidance in schools for 1920. So it's something that we believe in, something that we know there'll be tremendous benefit for our students, but it's a requirement that comes forth without any additional aid. And so it'll be a burden that we'll carry on the district's back, but to do so in a way that certainly delivers for our students.
There's also quite a bit of state aid uncertainty, and state aid makes up part of our revenue, which is obviously the other piece of the budget piece, which we're going to be talking about more in March, but it's something that has us worried. Foundation aid, you'll all hear about that. It's going to go up slightly. In our case, very, very small amount. But if the formula we're running, which I'll show you on the next slide, we're still not getting what we're supposed to be getting. And I'll say that in a minute. There's a political landscape that's saying that aid should go to the neediest school districts and not school districts with more means. Well, we have more means, apparently. But yet our income is all funding the state budget. So 80 to 85% of the state budget is being funded by Westchester and Long Island income. I'm taking out New York City completely in both equations, but that money is going to be going all upstate, so not coming back here. There's a bunch of proposals that the governor has recommended in his first budget presentation that he made in January that concern me, or should concern us really, and that is they want to put a cap on some of our aid. Transportation aid, building aid, BOCES aid, they want to cap it at 2% increase. Well, those aids are based on what you spent and what's owed to you. So if they put a cap on that, that could be very detrimental to us. I have not finally heard all of the details of this. I'm going to be going to another seminar next week on this, but that's what I'm saying. This is early for us, but it's concerning. It's definitely concerning on what that could mean to us, especially building aid, because that, we have set schedules for that. I've planned that out for now the next, several years. The other one that concerns us is that we run a summer special ed program. Every school district is required to do that, where some of our students continue their education program all summer long. And right now, we only pay 20% of the cost for that. The state has been picking up the other 80%. They will be looking to make that we would end up having to pay about 75% under their current proposal. It would be going under a your ratio. Well, upstate ratio might be the 80%, but ours won't be. The tax levy cap formula, while it's done some interesting things and for the community, in terms of making our taxes maybe a little more reasonable, but the problem with the formula itself is that it hinders our ability to plan. Because in any given year, you could have a levy growth factor that's small, or you could have one that's up to 2%. Now this year inflation was even higher than 2%, but we're capped at 2%. If it goes up to 3% or 4% inflation next year, the CPI, we will be at 2% for that law. Secondly, You cannot, the carryover piece of it, so let's say you had a levy growth that maybe was, X dollars, but maybe you only needed a little bit less than that. If you don't take that full amount, that remainder is lost to you. This formula says you can carry this over. Oh, you can carry this over. And everybody hears about this formula that you can carry over, but you really can't carry it over because the amount that you can carry over has to be over your capital levy exclusion, and that is the number for us, about $2.6 million. We haven't seen a levy increase in that much since it started. So there's no way we can do that. So either you have a very small capital levy or you have a very large levy cap increase. So that really needs to be changed so that we could then plan when we needed our levy increases over a period of time. Tax tertiaries is another area when I look at the fiscal landscape, and this is one of those ones where you don't know what you're going to pay in any given year. Right now our exposure is technically about $20 million that were filed. Okay. Now I know that not all of those will come to fruition, and I would say that if I were to look at our true exposure, it's more like $4 to $5 million. Okay. But our reserve is only $1.5 million right now. So that's really a tough one to have to plan for that. So that's one of our challenges that we're always looking at.
So it is, I referenced earlier, we see changes in enrollment, and when we talk about enrollment, it's just not new children that are taking seats that are existing in our classroom. Students come to the Irvington district with a variety of different needs and different services, as we referenced potentially E&L. We think about students with special education needs, and a lot of them are unpredictable in knowing exactly what a child's needs may be when a particular child moves into district. So there's a degree of uncertainty that really rolls into our budget. And it's certainly an area that we annually have concern in and around. But we step back and we think about costs that do exist beyond our control, pension contributions, and we're looking at significant increases this year. So when we think about the opportunity that we have to increase our tax base through the tax cap, a lot of that is going to be consumed by pension contribution increases of 10.6% roughly for this coming year. We think about health insurance increases that increase anywhere from 5 to 6% a year, and we're well ahead of the curve in that, and been very fortunate, but our experience could shift. We look at utility cost increase, and then BOCES is also another factor that we worry about because we have obligation in supporting BOCES, and their fees continue to fluctuate and increase every year. They have a lot of obligation as it comes to post-employment benefits that are now trickling down to all their member districts that we are starting to feel that will have an impact on our school district budgets.
So I alluded to this slide a minute ago, but this is really just, this slide shows what we've lost in terms of foundation aid over the last basically 10 years. And what's scary is that the percentages is growing that we're lost, because what's happening for us is in a district with enrollment that's flatter up, the percentage that we've lost has actually been, that we've been paid is going down. So we've continuing to lose money. In fact, our total aidable foundation pupil units, which is what this is based off of, went up this year by about 60 students. So it's not exactly enrollment because there's a lot of factors that go into that number, but that's what's causing our number to go from 60 to 54, and I anticipate it being around that level for the next couple of years. It's not a good trend for us to have.
So when we think about where we've been, and this is a slide that we continue to utilize and update from year to year, we've been in a rebuilding phase for the past 5.5 years. There was certainly the financial crisis that went back 08, 09, and we saw many cuts across the school district, as happened in many surrounding communities. And we saw a large number of positions eliminated, all in the effort to balance a budget. We saw opportunities going to children in electives and other programs being reduced. But the board and the community was courageous back in 13-14, and as Mr. Hanna referenced before, took a step to override the tax levy cap, and in doing so, we pivoted, and we've been looking at building. We've been restoring opportunities for our students. We've been adding new experiences, all to enrich the learning experience for our students. And in doing so, we've maintained responsible tax levy from year to year, and had the last 4 years that were at or under the cap. So, Carol?
So this slide just kind of gives you the sense of the budget from year to year, and it's broken out by the various components. The components that we're talking about tonight, I'll show you differently in a pie chart to see it a little bit more in perspective. But one number I do want to call to your attention is the very top blue, which is the tax certs. That number is actually not in our budget in any given year. So we don't really budget for tax certs. We have a small reserve that we've been maintaining. We've been borrowing to pay these back. So, and that number has ranged from anywhere from, 2.5 million on the highest in any given year to maybe a little under a million in one year. Last year was actually the lowest because of the timing of some of the tax certs and also because it was the reassessment year. So I think that impacted it. But that was the only year that was really not even near $1 million. So this is, just something I want to bring to your attention because it's not even in our budget. So that's really, and we'll get into the other components as we move further on in the presentation.
So as I referenced before, we look at what our budget trends have been. And over the years, we have really worked hard to maintain our programs, to restore programs, but at the same time having an eye to the impact on the community. And in doing so, you can see that we've had modest increases, whether you're looking at the budget or looking at the tax rate increase. The one challenge that we have to see is hard to be able to draw upon these comps, looking from last year forward, because we're establishing that new baseline from which we'll be able to draw our comparisons from year to year.
So one question that's always asked, and we'd like to kind of just talk about it in some of our presentations, is what is fund balance, and why can't you use that to be part of your budget, and what is it really? Fund balance is really generates from when you make a budget as a plan, so you're not really 100% sure of every expense that's going to happen and every revenue dollar that you're going to get. At the end of the school year, whatever is remaining from your revenue, your expenses minus your revenue, is basically what goes into fund balance. So it's not like that money disappears, it goes away, it goes into your fund balance. Districts are only allowed to keep 4% of their total budget number in fund balance. It's a pretty low number. I would say that most other, in fact, it's only school districts that have to keep that lower number. Municipalities can keep more. Businesses obviously keep a whole lot more in terms of a fund balance. But we're at 4%. And if you're not at the 4%, the Office of State Controller says, well, you're not doing well, and you're going to be considered in fiscal stress. But you also can't keep a dime more than 4%. So there's like this interesting dichotomy going on with the State Controller. But we use it to, if we really didn't need it, roof broke, something happened with the roof, we could actually use it. We also use it as a way to start the year, because we don't get our tax dollars till October. We have to fund July, August, and September, and even early October until we get our revenue. So we use it also for that, instead of having to do any borrowing, any short-term revenue borrowing. So again, if you don't have it, you're looked at as not being fiscally strong. You could result in a higher or lower bond rating, which would affect your borrowing rates. And the Office of State Controller would say you're in stress. So we do manage our fund balance very carefully.
So when we think about our budget process, tonight we are going to talk about our operations and finance component of the budget. And in doing so, there's a certain segment of the budget that we're going to focus on. And as you can see, as we head into March, a month from now, we're going to delve into the curriculum instruction side. But we have a tight window to make a lot of important decisions. So when we think about the difficult seat that the board is in, you have to sit back and you have to process all these challenging questions that are coming your way, to weigh the recommendations that are being presented by your administration. And at the end of the day, to arrive in a place where we have a fiscally responsible budget that still delivers upon our strategic objectives. So that said, when we think about where we are with operations and finance, this is where we step back and we think about, gosh, how do operations and finance connect with what we do in the classroom? And when we come back to our strategic objectives, there's 4 areas that we see some connections. Talking about innovation and creativity, there's linkage because space and equipment leads to that. We think about social and emotional growth. There's connection in and around facilities and opportunities that come via the structures and the systems that are our buildings. We think about opportunities to strengthen those local connections, and that can be feedback loops, that can be communication. Then, of course, the most obvious is the fiscal health of the school district. So when we step back, that is the overarching strategic objective. So that's something that we're going to focus on throughout our presentation, but we're going to make those other connections as we look to define what our needs are. But as I said before, we recognize we're going to have a lot of challenges. So as we go through this process, and I look to the board and members of the community that understand that there's lots of things that we're going to put out there for conversations, but during this process, we're naming needs, but our reality is going to come out. Our reality is going to tell us what we can afford, and we're going to have to step back and think about what is sustainable and what is going to move our district forward in alignment with those objectives. So when we think about the areas that are going to be covered within the business and operations component tonight, it covers a lot of different areas, and the areas that kind of keep the district going outside of the classroom. So we think of the Board of Education and obvious expenses that are here to support the board's work and the operations of the district clerk and so on. My office, my support staff. We think of everything that happens on the finance side. And there's lots of folks involved in that process, and thinking about not only Carol, but we think about all of the folks that support the operation there. There's legal services, human resources, public information, and other communication costs, facilities and operations, which we'll talk about quite a bit tonight. Central data processing, which sounds like a bit of an outdated term, but what you want to think of there is the infrastructure that supports technology across the district, and something that we always have to continue to invest in. And then we have areas that we refer to as special items, which are those BOCES costs, insurance, and other responsibilities that we have, transportation, debt service, and some other fancy terminology with transfer to other funds that Carol will speak about. But when we look at that large list, I want you to step back and take a look at the pie. So that's a lot of aspects of the budget, a lot of key components, but realistically, it only amounts to about 23% of the overall budget. So our conversation tonight is going to sit in that upper right-hand corner of this pie. And then when we come back in March, we're going to be focusing on the other 77%. So when we look at where we are and those variances from year to year, there's different considerations that come into play. Some things that we certainly have control over, and others that we don't. So when we look at salaries, certainly it's part of our reality that folks make more money and get raises, so we have to account for those costs each year. Little things. So we think of our staff makes up the largest majority of our budget, but our board, 7 members, there's expenses associated with the board operations. We're looking at the possibility of developing a capital project, and in doing so, there's expenses that come along with that. In looking at bond counsel to support our work, to have fiscal advisors that are going to guide our financing efforts. And of course, that whole other, we call it a district meeting, but that other vote has significant costs that come along with that. We're going to go out for an RFP for our external auditor. And in doing so, we know we're going to realize increases there because our auditor has not increased their rates in 5 years. So we know with the RFP, we should expect some increases there. Looking at our internal auditing services, we have to focus on regularly having an audit of one particular area, so there'll be costs that are associated with that. On the facility front, and as we'll learn more about tonight, there's simply needs to maintain our facilities, and that's the buildings and grounds, and to try to support new initiatives as they come up. I referenced BOCES earlier, but when we think about technology, we have an infrastructure that is growing. We're bringing more devices into the classrooms, and to do so, we have to be able to support that infrastructure with increased bandwidth, and we also need to just maintain what's there by supporting and replacing components of our infrastructure. Transportation costs will increase. We know that there's a CPI factor, which is inflation, and inflation is going to go up and impact our costs. and we're actually going out to bid for out-of-district busing services, so we'll see different costs there. And there's other factors that we look at too, and what are student needs, and we have more students that are interested in occupational education or VOTEC type learning, so there'll be added costs as we identify those needs. The one area that we step back and look at, where we're seeing some positives, is our debt service, which is actually going down a little bit as we have some short-term borrowing that is being paid off this year. So that said, Carol and I are going to begin to introduce some of our new considerations. These are the things that we're weighing as opportunities for exploration throughout our budget process, but as I said before, we want to temper enthusiasm. We're identifying needs. These are things that we're looking at and would benefit from in our school district, but we know that it's not possible for all of them to make it to that final proposed budget at the end of this process. The first we actually touched on at our last Board of Education meeting, which is looking at the role of our district clerk. Elaine has served us so very, very well for many years, and she has done so for many years, serving as the assistant to the superintendent as well. But now, Elaine is solely working in the capacity of the clerk. But when we talk about the responsibilities that fall within the district office and leading all the work that happens in the district, there are so many other components that are shared by people that need to put their attention on other things. So when we think about where we are today, Carol is our public information officer. So when there is a FOIL request, a request for public documents, Carol is sitting down and is the one that's weeding through all the documents, reviewing them with legal counsel. She's engaging Dr. Kaur, myself, dozens of other staff members, depending on the request. That takes her away from her primary responsibilities. We also have registration. We've talked about it 2 or 3 times tonight, and that we're seeing lots of folks come in and register in our school district. Registration typically comes in waves, right? We look at registration. Kindergarten happens, gets really busy in February through the spring. We have folks that are enrolling as they're moving to the community for the new school year throughout the summer months. So there's definitely busy seasons, but we've seen consistent, regular interest in our school district and constantly have new enrollments. Carol is also handling that as the assistant superintendent for business. So our proposal is to step back and to think about expanding the role of the district clerk by making it a half-time clerical position as well that would support those other operations in the district. And then again, seeing the link is that when we're looking at that, we're going to have more timely responses, more dedicated responses to be able to interface with our community, which will be certainly helpful on a number of different levels. When we think about the next item, we're actually in the process of developing a survey that's going to go out to our entire school community, where we're looking at essentially a satisfaction survey. We want to get feedback and perception data about how we're doing from a student lens, from a staff lens, from a parent or community member lens. And in doing so, there's costs associated with that. And we want to be able to have a reliable set of data that we can benchmark and use from year to year to measure our progress. So in doing so, we have to be able to invest in that front, and there's costs associated with that, and working with research companies that are going to not only help us develop the surveys, help us administer the surveys, but very importantly, analyze the data that we get back.
One of the initiatives that was started recently was at Main Street School, where they've been doing this recycling project, and we would like to expand that to both Dow's and the middle school. And that project is one where you're separating out paper and trash and cans and bottles. It would be including setting up stations in cafeteria and hallways and classrooms with the appropriate receptacles for that sorting. It includes signage on what to do. And ultimately, this would actually cut down on our trash, too, so that would be another benefit. But there's just costs of materials for doing that, and we think that would help foster the creation of a culture where students are active in their society. And we all know that this is the right way to go at this point in our world. So one of the requests that came from the middle school was for a late bus. So this was to be able to have more students participate in homework club and in other after-school activities, perhaps drama, things that maybe they couldn't participate in because they didn't have a way home. So we're looking to see if we can add a late bus, not just one that runs right, 10 minutes after school, but like an hour later. So we're exploring that. This would include a cost for both the north run and the south run. Because of the geography of our district, you really don't want someone on the bus the entire whole circuit, so it would be two different, routes. Let me switch, okay. You're right where I want to be. So, in thinking through, Gary, as a director of facilities, spent a lot of time, in November, December, even into early January now, really working with me on what he needs, what the department needs, what the district needs, and came up with this very large list, which we're going to share a lot of it with you tonight. But as we were going through it, I guess we kept saying, Gary, can any of this be done in-house? Was my question. Can any of this be done in-house? And Gary's like, yeah, but I just don't have, I need another person, or I need another person with a little bit more expertise. And the expertise that we really identified was more HVAC/plumbing, because that's the need that right now our infrastructure is screaming for at this point. It's screaming for some more help there. And you'll see that throughout the presentation tonight. But I do estimate that if we were to hire a second maintenance mechanic, because we do have one, but he does more of the carpentry and all the odd jobs, all the fixing jobs around here. But if we had another one with a little bit different expertise, we would probably be able to save it. And I have save money in total, and I have another slide that shows you the net at the end. But from a budgetary point of view at the moment, it would cost us $11,400, but it would allow us to do an additional $43,000 more projects, so it really would be a net savings ultimately. I just can't show that in the budget because I didn't budget those projects, so I can't save them at the moment. We are doing window cleaning and rain gutter cleaning once a year. We would really like to do that twice a year. We think that would have a good effect on our buildings to shine better. No pun intended there. Contractual maintenance, preventative maintenance, these are things that, we should be doing more of to protect our basically our HVAC is the most area. I found out this year we really had never budgeted to do a hot water repair, a hot water heater. Right. So when it went, we were like, it was really like the guys, well, when was the last time you serviced this? We're like, a couple of years now. Like we just hadn't because we don't put that in the budget. So that's something that we really need to start spending money on is preventive maintenance. Circulating pumps, air handlers, those types of things. And the plan there also would be to, spend some money, have a company show us what to do, and then have this new person learn how to do it, and then do it on our own, so that we aren't having to, always pay someone to do it. Because again, that's the first thing that gets cut is when you pay other people to do it. So, Dr. Harrison mentioned that we are thinking about a capital project planning. So obviously, you need to pay an architect to help guide us during that process. So I would like to add some more funds for that because that's not something that's in our current budget. On the next slide. So I spoke before about tax cert reserve, and it's limited amount, bless you. And one of the things that, if you were to ask the business official what you would like to see in a budget, it would be to have some money put in the budget toward funding the tax cert claims, so that we weren't always in that pickle of where are we going to get this money from this year if we have a large amount of cases settle. And cases settle, they also just get judged against you. So there's really some control, but not a whole lot. I mean, you can litigate, but that also has a cost. So I would recommend putting some money in there. The amount, I'm not really sure of yet. I think we just need to put a number on a page today, but it'll be something that we have to work through as we get the full picture here. The other place is that we would always like to see being funded is our capital. I mean, every year we should be trying to increase a little bit toward our capital. Whether it can come out of the budget or not, it's just something I bring to your attention as a need. Okay?
When we think about these areas, this is that idea of thinking about sustainability. And these are targets and objectives for it. So when we think about tax certs, we want to be able to start the budget because we know there's going to be tax certs that are occurring on an annual basis. And we don't want to always rely on reserves that may not always be there. From a capital fund standpoint, we've talked about this. We created our capital fund 3 years ago after not having one in the past. And we did so not only to try to lessen the burden on the community when we have other major capital projects down the road, but did so in mind thinking about specifically towards the installation of the new Starros Field and Oley Track. And that knowing that there's a certain life span for the carpet itself. And 10, 12 years down the road, we're going to need the funds to be able to replace that. So the thought was that money such as this would be able to go to offset projects such as other larger scale capital projects. But the one caveat here with anything that we budget into a capital fund always requires voter approval for the money to be spent.
So now we'll put it back together because this is how we've been traditionally showing it. I think we wanted to show what the needs were and then just put it together instead of just showing each area. So we'll put it together in the way that we normally have been looking at it in our district, which is by function area. And so we'll put it all together. So Board of Ed, District Clerk, District Meeting, and Office of the Chief School Administrator make up one basic area. And so all in all, even with the, what I call the push-ahead variances that we described with the increased board size and the need for a new part-time district clerk, the total variance would be about $43,000.
I do want to just add for information, there's more detailed backup sheets for all these categories that show more details on the history of the spending and actual percent variance for each of the categories. Available in the back of the room and hopefully on the district website as well.
For the finance office, which is all those things that include payroll and purchasing and all those things we mentioned before, it's not a huge increase here either. We've put in the salary increases that we know we have. I put in a little bit more for that fiscal advisor that we know we'll need, and the increase in auditing. So that comes to about a little under $55,000. In the next area, which is comprising our legal expense, our human resources office, public information, and we actually do have a messenger, a person that goes around and helps us deliver, plus mailing costs. So it's all of our, not just that one person, but all of our mailing costs. That total increase is about $46,000. BOCES is a part of this because BOCES does, we do some of these services through BOCES. You'll see that in the detail sheets, what goes where. But that's one of those ones where they're saving us money, but we get aid. So it's sometimes when you see these increases, you know you're going to get aid on the revenue side a year later. Also, the postage went up at 1 cent this year, so that's factored in here. And included here also was that new survey that for $20,000. So a lot of this is really that one new consideration and then an increase for the bond council. So that brings us to facilities, and this is obviously the largest piece of this part of the budget. And so I have quite a few more slides to go through in a little bit more detail, but I'll just kind of go over some of the categories. Obviously, salaries is for all of our custodial staff. And equipment, building repair, and capital repair. Those three are ones we zero-based budget, meaning we start from scratch every year. So we don't look at what we've had in the past. We don't look at the amount we've had in the past. We say, what are the needs? And we look at that each year. Now, Gary puts together a list. It's always way too long. And then we talk about priorities. I ask him to say priority 1, 2, 3, so forth and so on. Who's the requester, the principal, us, where's it coming from? So we evaluate all that information to come up with, what we're going to present. So it's zero-based. Each item is new each year. But I do look at last year's budget just to say how much dollars did we have, because I also don't want to say, okay, I'm going to, recommend some huge number increase from year to year. So I kind of keep that in mind, and then some of those priority 1s become priority 1As or priority 2s, so we change things around to try to come to a number we can present. So I'll go through those three in detail. Supplies are all of our cleaning materials, paper products, tools, ladders, vacuums. Contractual, there's a lot that goes in contractual. It's, maintaining your alarm, your telephones, your intercom, the temperature control, boiler cleanings, windows, elevators, ground maintenance, electrical, vehicle maintenance, trees, all these things, equipment inspections, plumbing, anything, all that goes into contractual. So it's a large area of things we have to do. Utilities are obvious. We did see that, the LEDs that we put in, the gyms and some of the other areas, they're paying off a little bit. Our electricity is down. So I was able to lower that just a little bit. I'm a little bit concerned because we just recently got a memo that the rates are going up. So I have to take a look at that a little more carefully. That's maybe what's going to offset that. So I'm going to, again, do a little bit more analysis between now and we get to the superintendent's budget. But I'm hopeful that we can maintain that number. Security, we left flat because we feel we had a decent budget and we had already increased for that roving security guard last year. BOCES, we do safety training through BOCES. We do our crisis management planning through BOCES, which is our building safety plans and our district safety plan. That's all done through a BOCES COSIR. And Then the next two areas I'll talk to more in detail, building repair and capital repair. So all in all, this is an amount that's up, but we're going to explain the details. So as I said, we zero-based budget these items. What we don't get to will remain on the list. It's not like I'm going to say, okay, Gary, we don't want to do it this way, so we never do it again. It stays on the list. So we're hopeful that we will eventually get to some of these things. So the next slide, we'll be talking about are what's included. So under the equipment, some of the things that made the cut were carpet extractors, which Gary are basically heavy-duty vacuum cleaners for carpeting, right? Okay, auto scrubbers. We are looking to get a van for the maintenance mechanic. He currently has tools in his car. He's constantly having to bring things in and out of the building. As it is, we don't have a lot of storage space, so a vehicle for that particular individual would probably make him very more effective and protect some of our tools. And also a vehicle for our facilities director, so that he can get here in all kinds of weather. He is traveling on his own car, and it's very standard for a facilities director to have their own vehicle. Capital repair projects. So I looked at last year's number, and I tried to say, okay, you have this really long list. What could we maybe potentially include, and what were the most important to include? So looking at it from both a monetary point of view and what's a priority. One of the things we must do is replace our electrical transformer at Dow's. Con Edison has told us that we must do that. I'm naive. I think Con Ed should do this, right? But they don't do that. They say that's ours. We own it. So we have to do that. The concrete walls and window well at Main Street School, that's right in the parking lot when you come in the side door, right? That one is cracking and the railing is very loose. So we kind of see that as a safety issue at this point and needs some attention pretty quickly. The exterior backstage doors at the theater gym building are definitely worn and failing, right? I would say that they're rusty on the bottom. And finally, we have thought a lot about security, and that while we want to address security from a larger perspective on a short-term basis, we are hopeful that we could add some bollards in some key places where students are congregating so a car couldn't jump the curb and really hit any student. And just from a security point of view now, I don't even like to say this, but that has become a means of some people trying to do damage on purpose. So sometimes it could be accidental or on your phone not paying attention, and other times it could be something that someone's trying to do harm. So that's an area we're trying to look at, putting some money toward, and that's where I would phase it in different years. Building repair projects, I'm going to go this by school. And some of these are ones that I've identified that if we did have an in-house maintenance person, some of this could be done with the in-house person. So that's where you're going to see when the money came out that I did take some of these and put that toward it. But this adds up to a lot of funds here. But interior doors to the NPR room at the multipurpose room at Dow's. I can just read them all, but I think you have them, so I'm really not going to read them all unless there's something that sticks out. I'll stick out a couple things. Install air conditioning. You think that's not a big deal? Just put an air. It's not, because you need electrical infrastructure there. So that's where that gets costly. The next page, I don't want to read them all. The stairwell and the corridor lighting. Ms. Chapnick really would like to have that done. She's added that every year. It is very dark. I have to say, I'm in that school. I do agree that it's kind of a dark area. But it's challenging because there's concrete ceilings there. So that's why it's been installed every couple of years, because it's going to take a little bit more effort than just putting up new lights. Install electrical circuit for the outdoor use. That's another one. We are hanging an extension cord out a window to support the activities that are going on like, say, a Saturday or even evening outside. We don't have any electrical outlets in that building. So that's something that we'd like to rectify in this budget. Next page. Middle schools is a lot of this is actually in the quad in the area where there's a lot of the students use the benches. They actually really do, the picnic tables, and we'd like to make sure that it's safe. Some of them are very what would you say, they're rotted, right? So that's one of the areas. So they're and then the cafeteria tables, it's time for them. They've been there a while now, and they're getting past their useful life as well. And the high school, we're on the last phase of replacing our interior glass with the safety glass that we've committed to, so this will be the last year of that. We have to repair the ceilings in the gyms from damage. The principal would like to create a little bit more privacy in the guidance office, again, getting around the guidance standards. to have, the guidance initiatives. We do have guidance counselors, but some are meeting in an area where it's not private enough. So we're going to rework that. We feel we could do that in-house to some degree, but we definitely need more funds to finish that. The lighting, the stage, the curtains are dragging. They need to be lifted up a little bit, and there's seam repairs that need to happen for the TG building. There's a lot of painting projects. I don't want to talk about them, but they're scattered through in here, and there's a lot that didn't get included in terms of painting. So this painting is actually quite expensive. So some of the projects that didn't get included, I'm listing them. On the surface, it would seem like, again, some of these things are simple to do, like adding a bottle filling station, but many of them require significant plumbing in order to do that. So you can't just go and do that. Sometimes the floor replacements, you really need to get in underneath and take out multiple layers instead of just adding another layer on top. So it's always more than meets the eye, because I'm like, the administrator, why can't we just get this done? And then when I hear all the detail, I'm floored. So as to why we can't. Again, some of the ones that I didn't include could be maybe addressed if we had another maintenance person. And then finally, I'm listing the capital projects. This one, that there's just way too many of them to get to that number. Just the 1As alone, which were Gary's really original ones, and I made 1As because we couldn't do it, amounted to about $510,000. So, and then a lot of these we don't even have costs for yet. We need to get a little bit more handle on what exactly we're doing and what it's going to cost us. We need to be guided by an architect. Some of the costs are just, very expensive. One bathroom could be over $100,000 to do. So while, again, you think it's not that inexpensive, it is. So these are all projects that stay on the list, but I know, our Buildings and Grounds Committee is addressing a lot of our needs as we plan for a capital project. Also more painting, court replacements, striping. These are all ideas. Those four in particular, if we did hire that maintenance person, we could probably address those. So that would be another $43,000. So that's where I said I would bring that cost down. So really, if we did hire a person, in my estimation, it would save us the district money. All right, so going on to the central data processing. Again, this is the infrastructure of the technology piece. It's not the instructional technology piece. It's not the individual student devices, but it's the network, it's the internet, it's the server, it's the firewalls, it's all that things. And it's all the software that runs that as well. And the people who help run it. So our team that helps us run the network. So really, the big variance again is the equipment. All equipment in our budget is zero-based. So if you're going to see equipment, it's not something that you saw last year. Okay, it's every year it's set. But this year we're doing a chassis switch, and unfortunately I'm not really up on what all those things exactly mean, but basically they're all network switches. And some of them are a little bit more money than others, but, and then the other piece is the wireless access points. So if you're in one of our areas and you can't get in through the internet, it's because you didn't have enough wireless access points to connect, and you lose your connection and you go back on again as other devices have disconnected. So that's another area where we're trying to keep adding it. And Dr. Harrison already mentioned the bandwidth. All right. Insurance is one of our normal costs that we have every year. I don't anticipate it going up too much there. Refund of property tax. So this is one where I had said, okay, if we could have a chance to budget, let's put some money in. I don't know the amount yet. I don't know that we can even do it, but it's a need. So I'm putting it out there as your fiscal officer. BOCES, Dr. Harrison mentioned about BOCES, but this is the piece that we get charged. All the districts that are component districts of BOCES get charged an administrative and capital fee. That's to cover their central offices and their facility rentals and things like that. The problem BOCES is having is similar to every district, in that as their staff ages and retires, they're paying retiree health. So, but unfortunately, the Office of State Controller said no longer could they keep a reserve for that, and they had to assess it every year. So every year we're going to see that cost go up now as they have to pay it real time and charge it to each district. So that's been going up every year.
That also adds, when you think about their post-employment benefits, they've had a number of retirement incentives in recent years, and they've had some departments that they closed, which pushed a lot of folks into retirement. So those costs are all now being transferred to the local schools.
They did settle a contract, and in the future, they have made a situation where new employees and even existing employees are not going to get as rich a retirement health benefit. So we should start to see that, but it will take several years before we actually see the effect of that. But it's definitely a step in the right direction. They presented to the business officials. Transportation, again, not a lot of changes. I do see costs going up just from fuel costs that have been rising with CPI and at the pump, and also we have one contract that's out to bid. I won't know that until mid-February, what the outcome is on that, so this may change a little. We have monitors on our buses and also on our special education routes, not on our private school routes, but just about every other route has a monitor. So that's a cost that we have. So basically, this isn't really anything new. I did add some funds for if we need to have a separate bus for going to our road tech program out at BOCES, because I do see an increased enrollment there. And then finally, the last couple of categories. So debt service is actually going down by a decent amount as we've had some debt retired. The interfund transfers, those are, the special aid one is the one that covers our summer special ed programs. And that's the one where I have a risk here because this is still at the old way of doing it with only our 20% coverage. If it's we have to pay 75%, that's going to be a higher number there. And this was our suggestion to put some money toward our capital. So that's kind of how it all plays out in a function area, and then you've got your summary. So all in all, our proposed budget for this area, as I mentioned in the very beginning, is about $14 million, a little over $14 million, and the total change is $500,000 or so.
When we look at that push ahead aspect of things, you're actually seeing at the bottom of the screen that negative 1.3%. But it's when we bring in the additional new considerations, the new things that we'd like to explore, that we're able to begin to realize the increase in total of 4.2%. With that said, we know that this is a part of the conversation, and we're going to have at least another 3 thorough conversations related to budget. But I hope the community, the board, was able to see alignment with our strategic goals, also understanding how we are committed to maintaining our facilities and make sure that they are preparing great experiences or environments for our children to have their experiences. When we step back and we think about where we are today, my 6th year in district, our schools are in much better shape than they were 6 years ago. However, we have a long way to go, and this budget supports steps in that direction. As Carol referenced, we certainly need some larger scale capital improvements that would have to occur through a bond initiative. But in the interim, we're continuing to chip away at what those vital needs are today. And hopefully, with some additional maintenance employees, we'll be able to tackle that list in a certainly quicker manner. That said, tonight, our conversation has focused on the operation. We look forward to the conversation on the next meeting on the 6th when we begin to talk about what's happening in the classroom programs and how things are connected with our employees, which is the largest percentage of our budget. Some things that would come up that you may think would happen in this area of the budget. When we think about creating innovative spaces, there's a push and a desire to create more flexible learning spaces, and to do so we'd need different types of equipment and furniture. Just because of how budgeting aligns, that actually falls on the other side of the budget. So I certainly want you to hold on to that enthusiasm for March 6th when we talk about opportunities on that front. But this is going to be a fast and furious process. We're presenting tonight. There's lots of information still to be learned in this process, lots of fine-tuning, and lots of real lofty objectives that we put out there today. But when we arrive on March 20th, a month and a half from now, we're going to have that reality check of what we're able to achieve based upon the financial constraints that are before us. That said, Mr. Hanna, Board of Education, the discussion is yours.
Thank you. And and on the last slide, for those who aren't here, they can always email. And I guess, Carol, you get these emails?
Yes,
if
I
they
do.
come through? There you go. All right. So that's who will respond.
I think that one's appropriate.
Yes. Well, I have the opportunity. I want to thank you again for listening to this presentation. One of the things I always think about with the budget is that it really is an expression of the values of the organization. So in this case, the schools, how we spend money for you as students and the programs you have and the teachers that teach you and the buildings that you're in. So that's all what we're looking at this conversation and the one we'll have next month. So thank you. Do we have some questions that Maura or Brian? I know sometimes we wait till we get to you. Do you guys want to start off, Maura?
I think I understood on the cost of a part-time district clerk where the issues with registration are, but I wondered if you could fill me in a little here publicly about what the FOIL requests have been like for you, Carol, and why that's going to be a part of the new role?
I want Carol to be able to respond to that because she certainly faces the brunt of that labor that's associated with it. But just as just a little anecdote to help you understand where we are, that quite literally today, Carol and I were going to meet in her office to prepare for tonight to deal with some other business, and literally had to move stacks of paper on her conference table because they're in satisfying FOIL requests from community members, the volume of documents that have been reviewed and that will be potentially made available are piles this high. So when we think about how do you get to the point of these piles, that means that you're going through and you're collecting documents that pertain to these particular requests. So in that one case, for one request, no exaggeration, there's a pile about 8 inches high and its companion pile is about 15 inches high that sits next to it of all file folders of information that took hours upon hours of not just only Carol's time, but the support staff in her office to be able to pull that, our personnel office staff to be able to pull that. So literally, there's a visual associated with it, not just the time that Carol will speak to.
Yeah, FOIL requests, obviously, some of them are simple, you can answer them, you can run a report, not a big deal. Other ones are a little more onerous. They are data that was compiled either putting together a payroll or, vendor invoices that you have to now go back to your cabinet and look for. So depending on what it is, it could take time. And then all of our, almost every FOIL request, I have to evaluate whether this is public information or if it's protected information, so that requires a review on someone's end, and then I have to sometimes send that to our legal department for review. That's emails back and forth, phone calls, sending things to them to make sure that they're okay with it. So all of this, I obviously have to protect student privacy. There's applicable laws you have to look through. There's letters, it's just a lot of time. So I certainly don't mind giving, information to the public. I think it's a good thing, and as I do them, I try to learn what the public wants so we can post things appropriately, but sometimes they're just requests for the sake of requesting information, and some of the organizations do it, and then we have community members do it, so it depends on who's doing it. Like we have, a Seafood New York does some ones, we have people who want purchasing records, they want us to go back and list every invoice. Really, they're looking for a vendor list. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for some marketing. So there's different reasons for people doing this, and sometimes we never know the reason. But it does take a lot of my time, and it takes me away from things I really would love to do in terms of analyzing and creating better processes for things that we have.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Friedman?
I guess also for Carol, in terms of the things that we haven't been able to include in the initial proposal, focusing on stuff that's really on page 30, how much of that is things that are really needs and need to be addressed, or are they things that we can schedule over the next couple of years?
Well, I guess, if you ask Gary, probably everything needs to be addressed, right, Gary? But, we have to take a look at the age of things, how easy they are to do. Painting, we have a kind of a cycle where we've created a cycle for painting, hallways, classrooms. So we have a plan. It's just if we could get to more, we would. And And honestly, Brian, if things, one thing I didn't really say, but if some of our estimates come in a little lower, we will tackle some of these in next year. Possibly at the end of this year, we might tackle some of the things that were on the budgeted list, and then that frees up some money. So depending on how it goes and what we spend, we're always looking at, making sure that we are using the money to do that and not really end the year with any surplus in this area. So certain ones, are more, we'd love to do the washer and dryer in the Home and Career Center classroom. You got to go downstairs right now to do that. I don't know if anyone is in that curriculum right now among the Boy Scouts here, but that should be in that classroom, but it requires significant change in the way the venting is, right? And that's, so those are kinds of things where they're just more involved, and so they kind of stay on the list for a while. We've had a good idea to create a lost and found that we may be able to get to. It may end up becoming something where we can tackle it in-house, but we'll see. Some of these things are important.
I guess my concern is how much of this will just be added to the list next year, which will then have another 20 things on it? Are we just creating a list that's just we're never going to be able to address?
I think what's on this next list now becomes number one next year. So if it was a 2 this year, it becomes a 1. Hopefully that it moves up unless something else happens. So we're kind of keeping that list. Like I look at last year's list, and a lot of that stuff we put together this year would have been on last year's we couldn't include list.
So it's not like my Netflix list where number 5 never gets to number 1. I'm always putting a new film in.
We try to do that. I mean, obviously things are always going to crop up that become more important, but we have a plan, and we have obviously there's a 5-year building condition plan, and we're always looking at that as well.
So I would say maybe in addition to what Carol stated, we're looking at strategy and approach in how we're budgeting monies for certain reoccurring costs that occur within the operations side. So when we saw the large number for tree removal, well, that's growing out of the reality that we have a lot of big aging trees, and we have some that come down, some that will need to come down so they don't fall on people, and lots of maintenance of trimming limbs so no one gets hurt. So we've always budgeted a small amount of money, but what ends up happening is that the needs are greater than what it's been budgeted. So what ends up happening is that we go back then, and projects that are on the list get bumped for those emergency type projects. There's always been needs in and around plumbing costs, electrical costs, things along those lines, and they've come out of a general fund. So now we're trying to target exclusive funds in those areas, so we're not fixing a broken pipe at the expense of replacing window shades. So we're trying to be more strategic in the approach and creating the budgetary mechanisms to be able to support this moving forward, so that list doesn't just keep getting pushed.
I would say that a lot of this resulted from the lean years where we were deferring the maintenance, and that's the reality of almost every school district, and every school district around has either had or is going to be doing a decent sized capital project, and we saw that. So it looks like it's time for the Boy Scouts to.
Thank you.
Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
Oh, we're pleased you could come.
Got a couple bows on the way out.
They're working on their citizenship and community badge.
Oh, nice.
There you go.
Fantastic.
Good
Well,
luck.
You attended an interesting one.
Took some serious notes.
Yes.
They did.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
That's all I have for now. So.
Cool. All right, moving on to Monsieur Grévin.
I have a couple of questions. First one, I just want to talk about the transportation. I just wanted to revisit we talked about the busing, and I saw that you were thinking about a new addition for the late bus, and we talked about that before, and it made me think about the couple kids that are having to arrive at the high school at 6:40 in the morning, and wondering how we're moving towards that, and any kind of resolution for those families.
So David, we did do some things this year to help alleviate that a little bit, but the cost to really fix that completely is 4 new buses, and that's a lot of money.
Maybe we said it was like 30 grand a bus or something like
No,
that.
it's more than that. It's like,
It was 300,000 last year.
300,000.
Yeah.
So
Forgot a zero.
Not a zero, yeah.
Yeah.
Zero.
So that's the problem. So this year we added all 8 buses to pick up the high school kids. So we shortened their time on the bus and thus made it a little bit later that they could get on the bus. But still, they're getting there at 7:15 in the morning, because those same buses are now going to get the Dallas run. So we haven't alleviated it, we lessened it a little this year through the creative suggestions of that committee. Still something we actually want to keep on our list, but it's not so easy to fix at the moment.
Okay, and then the second one, can you do me a favor and just explain, or break the debt service? I mean, I guess it's good that there's a increase in variance of $700,000 or so. Can you just break out what do we owe, what are we spending
So
on?
I can provide you a schedule with that. It's basically, we have bonds for the construction of the high school,
The middle school and theater gym building.
Theater gym building, yeah. So I have each of the different bonds and the timing of when it's done. I had that schedule. Actually, the Buildings and Grounds Committee has looked at that, because part of, as we plan a capital project, you need to look at your debt going forward in several years to see where it drops off, so that you can figure out where a capital project would fit in without adding any new debt to the community. And if that's where you were going with that question, then we've already been looking at that, and the Buildings and Grounds Committee has that data. So they've done that for you, work for you.
You're good, you're covered. We got you.
Enough said.
Enough said.
It's one of the first things I looked at.
I would just like to say I think it was an excellent presentation, and thank you very much. It's so clear. I'm new at this. I'm not good at this. I'll be honest with you. You made it so much easier for me to get better at it. The backup in particular, and last year, trying to get my head around what accounts tied into what areas. Now I think it's really, really very easy to follow. I also really appreciate the tie-in to the strategic plan. I thought that was great. So for me, 1 year into the board, this is a presentation I really can understand, so I thank you, because this is a process in learning it. When I look at some of these, the one thing I'll start with, because it's the one I come back to last year.
And Deb, if I just may interject, and for all the trustees, when you're going to reference, if you happen to know a slide number.
Okay.
Just shout out the slide number, and I'll flip
Okay.
to the slide so the community can see it, and Martina can zoom in on it for the folks at home.
That's a good idea. The one I go back to, because it was one I questioned last year, is page 35, again, transportation. We had discussed last year, it was my surprise when I see that the private school special education transportation cost is higher than our in-district transportation costs. And in fact, it looks like it's going up, or at least you have it variance at $75,000, which I guess is fuel costs. Is that what you're?
Fuel,
Yeah. Increase. But again, I just come back to the fact that I would like to better understand why those numbers are so high, especially because I thought you had mentioned there's no monitor on that bus either, right?
There's no monitor on the private school bus, but
Mhm.
there's monitors on the special ed
Mhm.
buses. And what's interesting about this, I could give you maybe a breakout, but I think there's like 35 to 40 different runs that go on. So we're part of the quad,
Mhm.
which is we work with Hastings, Ardsley, Dobbs Ferry, and Irvington for this runs, not our in-district runs, but those runs. So a bus that could be going to Masters might have some of our students, it might have some of Hastings, and so forth. We may have enough that go to that one school for have our own run, depending on the numbers and where the students live. But basically, we're obligated to bus kids to Iona Prep, to New Rochelle for one of their schools, to anywhere in a 15-mile radius. So, and these runs can go anywhere. So the problem is they're all small buses, but even though most of them are small buses, but even them, they still cost a lot. There's a driver, there's time. This is where you're getting kids all over the county.
Mhm.
And it's the nature of the beast here. So we are saving money because we're not just the only ones going to New Rochelle now. We're picking up anybody else from our area going to New Rochelle. So we are definitely saving money that way, and saving kids time on the bus.
Mhm.
Because if we didn't do it that way and we just did it ourselves, we would have more schools, and these kids would have to get out really early to go to that location, because they might have to go to 3 different schools on their own.
Mhm. I'm curious, though, in terms of ridership, whether the companies do a survey, so we actually know that those who are signing up for private school runs, for example, are actually getting on the bus.
Yeah, they do. In fact, what happens on the private school runs, we do ridership surveys throughout the year, but on the private school runs, if the driver notices the student hasn't been taking the bus, they contact the transportation office, who then contacts the family and says, can we take you off the route? Is your daughter or son driving themselves now? Especially as they get older. And then we reroute. and then I see a change in the bill the next month because someone has plumbed off and then their whole rate changed. And that, the interesting thing is that could happen because you do it on a share basis. So now if a Hastings kid got off the bus, it might cost Irvington more because our share is higher. So it's a really complicated thing, and the spreadsheet changes every month. So and then sometimes you can even have, you have a private school, maybe even one special ed kid could be on that run if it's very close, and it's a student that's, not a student that really needs a lot of special attention, just that's special school. So there's a lot of complications going on there.
Okay, and last question on it. I seem to recall last year, though, that you had also said that that was something that maybe would be worthwhile looking at to see if there was a way to cut costs with some creative solutions. I don't know what those are. I'm just curious if any of those conversations come up when you speak to the quad folks. Is there anybody doing anything, like giving incentives not to take the private school bus because they're only using it once every month, or, something along those lines?
The only thing I can say is, we advertise now. You have an April 1st deadline to get the bus. You have this application. We've been pretty strict. If you haven't signed up by April 1st, we're really not letting you on that bus. Unless you move here after that and can prove it. So we've been pretty strict with that.
Okay.
I know some districts are not, but we are, because the planning that goes involved takes time. So that's one area where, we don't just have, we advertise it, we do what we're supposed to do, but we don't, go knock on your door.
Right.
So it kind of is what it is. I think what's happening, and maybe the trend will be that as students are re-enrolling in our school, there'll be fewer going to private schools. And I have seen a little bit of that happening with registration lately. We've had a couple of kids coming back from some of these private schools. And that might be the way to save.
Okay. Also, just a comments. I know we're still early in the process. In terms of hiring somebody in the maintenance to report to Gary, I can see, I thought you did a very good job making it clear that there would be a nice trade-off by bringing somebody in. There's a cost savings. As I can understand why there'd be a benefit to have somebody in-house as opposed to outsourcing. One of the questions that I was just curious about, though, is in terms of painting. Is that something that we outsource or that we handle in-house?
So right now, we mostly outsource.
Is that something, again, that we could look to bring in-house more so?
Some of those projects in that $67,200 would be for painting.
Okay.
So we did, obviously I kept money in for materials for paint, but we did, some of the projects for painting are in there and some of them wouldn't. The problem with painting also is the time element, because you have to do them either during breaks or over the summer, and then when the buildings aren't being used or cleaned. So there is some benefit to having a painting company that comes in with 20 guys and comes in and paints, and then they leave. So, there is some aspect of that, but painting is expensive.
Gary, let me use the mic.
During a holiday break, you can't really rip the classroom apart.
True.
Students will return. So that's one of the reasons we have it.
I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, right. So it's not like you could have somebody full-time just going around painting, touching up. You actually have to do it when it's closed, of course. Okay. And I think that was it. Yes, but in general, I just wanted to comment that I thought that the considerations that you put on the table, being in building and grounds, I know that I can represent that we went over all of these in great detail for many hours, and there's a lot of good reasons for a lot of the proposals and the considerations you put forward, including things like the architectural fees and capital project planning. I just wanted to highlight that I thought that having somebody to guide the district on anything that we're going to build or design, and from the very start, from the day that we put out the RFI, I thought was great to see in there. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you. And just maybe to piggyback, Deb, your last comment, that we did have an RFP for architectural services. The committee did interview a number of firms, and we're doing our diligence now and bringing the final recommendation forward to the Board of Education, and we look forward to making that recommendation in March. And with the board's authorization and signed contracts, B&G committee gets to take those big next steps and start planning what our process looks like. But we need the partnership of those experts to be there with us.
Yes, I just had a couple of questions, comments. One, page 22, I noticed the 78% increase year-over-year in public information. Is that just the survey? Is that what that is, the 27,000?
20,000 of that is the survey, some of it's postage, and the rest is a BOCES increase.
Okay. And then on the page 23, the salary increase, the variance is 175,000, but we spoke only of a maintenance worker for 78. So is
Well,
the
we have
delta on that
26 staff members there,
So that's just the increases in salary year over
step
year?
increases, and, I factored in a small wage increase. Our contract is up with them, so I don't exactly know what that's going to be. Again, that's another number that, I'm taking a stab at, but I'll put a small amount. And then, you have people moving step again with that.
Right.
So.
So then the last comment was with regard to the 200,000 in capital repair, 200,000 in capital budgeting. The thinking behind that particular number as opposed to, say, 100,000 and using the other 100,000 for some other one-way projects Gary's got. How did we arrive at that number?
You kind of come up with a number on a percentage basis and just say that might be a fiscal number that you could work toward. Will I think we get to that number? I don't know. I mean, when we see how it all fits together, probably not. But my guess is that, we should be thinking about it and just planning. And whether we can do it this year or a future year, I put it out there as a concept.
And I certainly see the need for it. The concern, of course, is the lack of flexibility around spending it because it requires voter approval. But nevertheless, I do see we should do something about it. I'm just wondering if there's some flexibility in that number.
I think when we step back and we look at this, there's flexibility in the thinking around the process, right? And where the monies get allocated. So if we're fortunate enough to, and at the end of the day, and just looking at this particular slide, we're looking at $600,000 on this slide. If at the end of the day we can afford $300,000 of this, I think the discussion that we have internally is how is that money best utilized? In some cases, it's going to be investment in a reserve account, such as one of the ones referenced, or some of it may move into that one-time expenditure. And the one thing that comes to mind that I think is probably in your mind as well is a bathroom renovation, for example, and we already have a state-approved project, and we have an estimated cost that, a sum of $130-some thousand comes to mind, right, Gary? That may be a possibility that presents more flexibilities with the monies down the road as well.
Actually, I was thinking of the innovative learning spaces, not the bathroom.
Well, there you go.
Again, some of them require, a longer timeline too. So, projects that, like the innovative spaces, that
I
collaboration.
was only joking.
Could I just add a quick question on to Catherine's, please? So
Can you move the mic closer, please?
these funds are a part of the 4%, or are they excluded?
Outside of that.
It is outside of it. I just wanted to double check that. Thank you.
And I guess, does the recommended amount add up to about 10% when
Of all of our fund balance?
the fund balance plus these other reserves, or there was some number in terms of what we got?
Right. I don't have that with me, Michael, but our overall reserve number is a little on the low side. The state noticed that we're on the lower side. In fact, we went down this year. I don't know the percentage on my top of my head, but yeah. And we need to keep our reserves strong.
Yeah.
This will help us a little bit in that regard. Whether we can do it this year or not, I don't know. I haven't seen the total yet. I'm still working on that because of all the pieces coming together. But it's just something that, as I look at the long-range plan, I would recommend to you. I don't know I'll recommend it on March 4th or March 20th, but right now I'm saying, hey, if I had my druthers, this is what I would be doing.
Yeah, I'm done.
Thank you for this presentation. I actually love the changes that you've made to it compared to previous years. I too think it's easier to understand, and I appreciate all the little details, leaf blowers, all those little things are not on here anymore. My question is kind of following up on the questions that Brian asked. Gary's got a budget, whatever total number you want to put it at. Is it enough? Because, there's always going to be projects to do. And I understand years ago, a lot of things were deferred given the times and everything, and we've been making improvements. And we've been proactive with, addition of the maintenance person, and it seems like this additional person seems like it's a smart ask as well. But overall, like you've said earlier, we have to balance everything. Is this a budget, an overall budget that should see some sort of an increase in the total dollars? So Gary could fix more things and maintain other things? Or is this, a good, smart, ask for now?
So if you look at slide 23, all in all, this budget is up. It's up a decent amount. And while salaries makes up a good part of that, the contractual piece is another piece that we've increased a lot this year. And that's the preventive maintenance. It's a lot of the different things that we talked about, trees, things we know we need to do. So I think in that area, it's a responsible number. It's definitely an increase, that Gary has been asking for. As far as the building repair and the capital repair projects, I do think it's responsible because there is only so much we can do outside of a larger capital thing. And in terms of management of it, timing, how much you can get done during the year, even in the summer. So I think it's a responsible amount. If you have outside contractors and people managing it, then you can take on more. But we only have our staff and our school time off. So we really, again, now you're managing a lot of smaller contractors in terms of doing what we're doing. So I think it is. I think it's a reasonable amount. It looks like it's going down, but it really isn't because of the projects that the new maintenance person is covering, which is in the other line. So it's a bit of a flip-flop, which is why I put it on that other slide. So it's not really going down in terms of the building repair. It's flat or more. And the capital repair is about the same or a little bit more. So I do think it's a pretty responsible budget. And all in all, it is up. So.
And I would just, if I may add, that there's, I think this is an area like things related to classroom and technology where if you had the opportunity to do more, you absolutely would do more. Draw it back to the comment that Carol made with respect to that we have one person that's managing all of this, so there's a capacity component here as well. But there's little efficiencies that I think that get worked into this. So we have the purchase of two $25,000 vehicles, and by purchasing those vehicles, it adds layers of efficiency that allow us to get more done too. So they're one-time expenditures, but we don't have our current maintenance mechanic going and taking a pickup truck from someone else that's doing some other work to go to Home Depot to buy his materials where he has his own. He's not running from place to place to pick up equipment, or, Gary running to pick up things in his own car. So there's little efficiencies that I think are built in that ultimately make that money go a little bit further than it is on paper.
And then regarding the other bathroom, I believe it's a girls' bathroom that wasn't repaired years ago, is there an update on that? Is the intention from maybe Buildings and Grounds to incorporate that into a possible bond, or are we just kicking that bucket to one day?
No, it's still on the list. Obviously, it's on the capital list, and where we put it, either in this budget or in the capital, potential capital project, is definitely on the list.
Okay.
And that was one of the ones we do actually have already approval for.
Right.
So it's a good, ready-to-go project. Those don't really expire unless there's any significant change to the building, which there hasn't been, so.
Okay.
Shovel ready.
Shovel ready.
There you go.
But
Hopefully we
it would
don't
have
need
to be over
shovels
the
in a
summer.
bathroom.
Yes, hopefully not. That would be worrisome. Excellent presentation. Thank you very much. Really clear and straightforward. And great work in terms of, I love that considering all the deferred maintenance from the lean years, as you call them, the comment of beginning years, our buildings, the work that's gone into them over the summer is really impressive. And yet, it's effectively what you said is we can't catch up on that model alone. And I think the small efficiencies you talk about are fantastic. I think that getting those vehicles, I think, will benefit. But where do those vehicles end up at the end of the day? What's the garage for them?
That's part of the capital.
Yeah, okay. So,
We desperately need that, and we desperately need storage for those two
Yeah.
areas.
so I think we really underlined that there is just so much we can do in a year-to-year basis. But that leads me to the other concern, which is when I have gone to regional meetings, West Chester Putnam School Boards Association, a lot of folks are really concerned about these caps on building, base pay, transportation, BOCES. So I think I would really love to hear more when you come out of this meeting that you'll have about the potential impact, because a lot of times we focus on, they're going to give us $5,000 more in aid or $50,000. I mean, aid came through for us a couple years ago when we had a negative tax cap. I mean, we would have been in tough shape. But that's not happening. But worse, they're actually taking money away from on the other side. And that's, I think, what we have to pay attention to. And that's where advocacy, I think, comes in our role, because we can reach out to our legislators, underline the concern, let them know that if that's allowed to go forward, that it really harms our schools.
That was my point. I think there's a definite need for advocacy here for stopping this. These are expense-based aid. This is based on what we've spent under certain circumstances. To just say that you're going to cap this is really unfair. It's completely unfair.
I'm sorry, just one last question or point is that, when we talk about doing a bond, or one of the justifications, right, we time it. That was a great question so that they're, everything we do pretty much is incremental. So we time it so it's related to expiring debt service, so it's not felt as an increase. But it's also, we count on, one of the benefits of doing a bond is, last time it was 24% that we were going to get back from the state. Is that impacted by that cap?
Well, right now we're up to 29.5%, which is the highest number that we've been at for a while.
Right, so that's one of the benefits of a bond.
Right, and, I've calculated our building aid based on that, we get these specific aid runs, you look at each project, I know the average, the balance, it's a very complicated process, but I've got it down to the penny, literally. And if we don't get that aid, that's not good, because that's in our budget. So that's a revenue risk to us, so I'm gonna follow that very closely and update you again in March, but it is a concern, and I think we should fight that.
And I would say, we should step back and maybe to Michael's point in around advocacy, and look at the politics behind it. In my mind, this is one of the steps where our governor is doing a dance to avoid another GEA, right? Gap elimination. And
Money was diverted from public schools for other uses.
Yeah, and so, we've heard how much news about, the state's budget deficit. So rather than going and saying we're tackling aid, where aid has been an issue, we had the slide up about foundation aid and the $10 million that we've lost and the millions of dollars that we're not getting that's due to Irvington each year. But this is just kind of another backdoor way of impacting the funding to schools. So we're not saying that you're going to get less foundation aid, because the momentum and the support has been to address that. But now what we're doing is finding another backdoor way to eliminate potential revenue for school districts, and thus lowering the state budget figures.
Might I also add to that, Chris? In addition to what you've said, what they seem to be asking to do with this new way of calculating aid for capital projects is that they're saying we will essentially get into a line, and our projects will be funded differently than other schools, maybe schools with greater need, if I understood it correctly.
That's a risk we don't know, yeah.
So they're looking at different calculations, which essentially says, in addition to funding our tax dollars funding schools across the state, we're essentially being asked to get back in line and get even less back when we're trying to make improvements to our schools. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think your point is so good, and then we're transitioning into how do we help ourselves through advocacy, right? And I can step back and say that I admittedly am really disappointed in our region in the position or lack of position we've taken on the advocacy front of late. If we go back 2 or 3 years ago, there was a strong unified voice where we had consistent messaging across our school districts. And when there was, say, a West Putt initiative, whether it was a local initiative, I looked to Beth in the audience who was a part of a lot of this work, Michael and Maura that were engaged in this. Irvington had a really strong voice. I can remember driving home during one of the breaks and actually getting a call from Lisa Davis, the executive director at West Putt, to say, Chris, the campaign Irvington has had the highest turnout of any school district in the region. Why? Because they were initiatives that resonated with our community. They were initiatives that were easy to articulate and for people to get their minds around. And right now, folks are disjointed, and the regional advocacy platforms that are being developed are too broad and too complicated to explain to people. It would be a 2-hour-long workshop to explain each of the 4 different initiatives that are at the front. So there's some need for shifts on that front. I know the Lower Hudson Education Coalition is trying to renew some energy and focus there. I can tell you, being on the executive board of the Lower Hudson Council of School Superintendents, we're dedicating much of our meeting this Friday to how we align ourselves in a position to fight issues like that. The challenge that we have is we're such a diverse group of school districts that what may serve Irvington or one of the other river towns is in direct conflict to what some of our friends in Mount Vernon, in just over the hill in Elmsford, what they need. So if we push something, it's seen at the expense of others. There's this balance that's difficult to find a happy medium.
Well, particularly if you're going to keep the pie one size. I mean, that's
Come back to what Carol said before, that the 85% of the Westchester, Long Island money is going upstate. And it speaks right into what Maura's talking about, priority and need. And you know the burden that the taxpayers of Irvington and Terrytown carry on their back financially, and it's disproportionate to others across the state.
And there's variations every year. I mean, Deb, when you asked the question about the private transportation, that's one example of something that happened years ago where money was diverted and used for non-public school use. So it's every year there's something that is being tacked on and impacting our district in terms of. So, and then the other thing I wanted to highlight was I guess one of the first slides that shows particularly I wanted to look at the tax cert piece. I don't know if that is number 3 or 4 of the slide. 7. All right. There we go. So, I mean, definitely in the first couple of years that Catherine and I were on the board, tax certs were a big piece of conversation. A lot of folks don't realize or forget that our district extends to 119, and so we're a lot of times talking about the commercial properties, and part of their business model is to grieve and try and lower their taxes. So that's been some big numbers, and I guess perhaps because of the reassessment, because of tax changes, other reasons, this year looks low. But like you said, there's been 20 million.
No, last year was low, but this year already we're up to 610,000.
Yeah.
And again, that's not budgeted, so that's got to either come out of the reserve or what would be going into our surplus this year. So that's a lot. Our reserve is only $1.5 million at the moment.
And every time that a property like that is successful, it's the residents who are then picking up the tab?
Well, it changes the assessment roll.
Yeah.
Now, fortunately, right now, the preliminary assessment roll is up a little bit overall, and I think that's, again, part of the reassessment. So that'll help the tax rate a little bit this year.
Mm-hmm.
It's still early, we're waiting for that data. So but what one person doesn't pay, someone else does, right?
Yeah.
It's one piece, and then you split the levy among the piece for the whole.
I guess the one final thing, and I don't want to be a Debbie Downer to what I think has been a constructive dialogue tonight. So when we step back and we think about, finances globally, and we know that there's been growth in our tax base, so that helps our formula. We know that the CPI is hitting that 2% level, so we could step back and be real optimistic and think, but there's going to be lots and lots of opportunity within the budget. But we're not thinking about, other factors that we know that are out there. So Carol, when we think about health insurance increasing 4+ points, when we think about pension contributions going up about 11%, that chews up a huge amount of what those increases are. So we could think that, hey, you know what, the economy is stronger, we're seeing some inflation that works in favor of a tax cap, but at the end of the day, we're seeing these other increases that are coming back tune of millions of dollars. So our balance is, how do we do some of this innovative stuff, and how do we create a budget that's helping sustain our finances long-term, support our facilities, bring new experiences to our kids, improve the experiences that exist, but do so in a way that we're not really stressing ourselves out and slashing all these facility projects and so forth. So I just want to really manage expectations that this is going to be a difficult process, and one by which we're going to have some challenging decisions to make as a team in the coming 2 months.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, yes, would any, this would be a great time if community members would like to ask any questions related to this presentation or make a comment. So I see any. Okay. I guess
Thank
you
you for
answered
coming
their
to the
questions. So we will now move on to the consent agenda. And if I could get a motion to accept the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any questions related to the consent agenda before we approve it? Okay, in that case, I'll go ahead and ask all in favor? Aye. All opposed? All right. And let me see if there's anyone we want to thank here.
PTA.
Yeah, PTSA.
$500 for the Italy.
Excellent. So the land trip to Italy, thank you to the PTSA for supporting the grant related to that trip. Very much appreciated. And then, are there any updates? I think would now be the time in terms of if there are any updates from committees. The one thing I will share is that Maria and I did meet with some of the executive school board members from, in this case, it was Dobbs Ferry and Hastings. Ardsley wasn't able to attend, but it continues to be productive in terms of sharing questions and perspectives and understanding. And again, continues to be remarkable the difference, even though our districts are right next to each other in terms of sort of the culture that each of them have. And I mean, one of the takeaways I had was actually I would love to find ways to bring some of you as trustees into some of these conversations, because it really adds perspective in terms of the work that we do. And I have no doubt that we'll learn some things that could help improve our practice. And we certainly, I think, felt like we were being able to be helpful to some of the other trustees from other districts in that conversation. So that we'll probably try and meet again in the spring. And I'm glad that we've been able to get that going again. I think I would just suggest, I guess, the buildings and grounds was covered in the presentation.
Yeah, it was. I mean, the only thing that maybe we didn't say at the last meeting, Charles certainly could elaborate, but the request for proposal for architectural and engineering services to assist us with some of these big ideas that we're going to be talking about was sent out December 13th. There was a deadline of January 9th, and 5 firms got back to us with proposals? Sorry, 4 sent in proposals. And then the members of the Building and Ground Committee met with those firms, and they came in, interviewed them, and we discussed the proposal. We also asked questions to gain a better perspective of what type of services they would provide and make sure it was in line with our needs, and we'd be able to work well together. And those meetings occurred, has it been 2 weeks now, I think? 2 weeks ago. And I think we were all pretty impressed with one in particular. So at this stage, I think we're probably going to follow up with one firm.
Right.
More to come.
Communications-wise, I think we have a few updates that we could share. We are moving. I don't know if it formally falls under the communications committee, but the district survey is moving forward. So there's a meeting in the coming week to develop that survey. And so we'll come back with an update about that process, and it's meant to be implemented after the break in February.
K-12 Insight, which is the research firm that we've partnered with that does this work with school districts across the country, going back, I think it was on our snow days, we had a conference call one evening with them, and they kind of mapped out their ideal timeline, and we're right within their timeline. They wanted to have a hands-on meeting this week. We have a meeting scheduled for Thursday where we have a representative group. We have a couple trustees from the communications committee. We have a couple administrators joining us. I've invited a couple teachers to join us. We have an elementary and a secondary parent that will be joining us, and a high school student that will be joining us, and they're going to bring in their database of questions that we're going to look at, and then have the opportunity to craft some unique Irvington connections related to other initiatives and projects. So according to K-12, we're on their timeline to have a survey out in about a month or so. But that's some exciting progress.
Yeah. Another area of communication, I think we mentioned this before, but we're looking to revise the district newsletter, which goes out twice a year to everyone in the district. And so just to make it more eye-grabbing, so people will actually take the opportunity to glean some of the great information that's in it. So that's something that's in progress. And when does the district newsletter come out?
Typically, we have one end of February, and then another one right before the budget. So we're starting to put together our story ideas, and I shared a number of different designs from around the region for the committee to give some feedback on, and we'll pull back on that front. But it should be the end of February is the target for that.
And then with the implementation of the website, did you mention this in update? But certainly, what we have to circle back and discuss further. There's a challenge that's arisen in that I'm not sure it's the federal government that is requiring that everything be accessible in terms of the ability for PDFs and videos. You know, if you can't hear the video, that they be subtitled, that the PDFs, if you can't read them, that there's audio. And it's not just our district, but a number of other districts that are being impacted. It just happens to be, and maybe opportunely while we're in transition. I mean, it's a big challenge to understand how to address it, and we have, I think, a concern that you know, there's some great information that's been put together in prior years that's available on our website, and what's the fate of some of that information. We'll have to figure out.
Yeah, lots and lots of challenges and lots of money associated with it. There seems to be a trend, and the movement is actually going to school districts, putting far less content out there, because what you publish actually on the website pages itself will be compliant with the ADA requirements. But the idea of any PDF is going to be coded with the appropriate metadata that different readers will be able to work with it, that people may use. That any of our video library that we have is going to have a certain level of captioning that goes far beyond what we have available today with our YouTube channel. What YouTube provides doesn't meet the federal standard. So literally in going through this, there's pieces to it. When we're creating PDF documents like this presentation that go forward, we will have folks that will be trained, and don't ask me who that's going to be at this point in time, because you know what our technology department is like, a person of one, that they will be coded accordingly. But the challenge is, how do you go back to old documents and do it? And the time and resource to do that. But then also looking at the video service. With video, you literally, the companies that are out there now charge you by the minute.
So the reason to have shorter meetings.
Yes. So there's a lot to be figured out, and Mr. Lubinsky's busy reaching out to different vendors and other providers to come up with ideas to how we could tackle this. But it's definitely complicated our path to the finish line of launching a new website in April with having any content that doesn't lie on a page. Really disappointing.
Any other updates? I think curriculum-wise, we included some of that in our roundtable discussion in terms of what surfaced with. Yeah, we gave it the last meeting, so that's kind of covered.
Say at the policy meeting, the continued conversation around Series 4000.
4,000 series, yes.
Is ongoing, and quite focused on looking at RTI and defining things the proper way. So,
Yeah, deep in special ed policies right now.
And I think the Wellness Committee met for recently. I don't know if there's any
Yes.
summary we want to share.
It was originally scheduled for one of the snow days and got pushed, was rescheduled. Some people were not there, couldn't make the parents. There was one parent there. Phil Whitney, no, two parents. Two parents, I take that back. So it was the first one of the year. Everyone kind of introduced themselves. Carol gave an overview of some of the new changes for this year. And then primarily the rest of the meeting was about the fact that we're going out for an RFP, about the consultant.
For our food
and
services.
For food services.
Yeah.
And that was pretty much the bulk of the meeting. What about that? Did I leave anything out?
We went over the survey and what the work of the past committee has done since it's been
So there was a survey from 2 years ago.
ago, and we went over the presentation. And we also went over the presentation that we made last year that all those presented positive in the school district. We have a lot. So we kind of reminded the committee, it's not just about food.
Of the new changes that were made based on the survey, correct? That
We have
you
like
gave that over.
mindfulness, meditation, TV, things like that.
And I think, there were some questions that were sent from the community. Are the consultants that we brought on going to be able to provide some?
So what I'm also doing as a result of that committee is we're creating a Google Doc where the people in the committee can add their comments real time, keep doing that, and then the consultant will have that as well, and so he can start evaluating the ideas against what's allowable and what's not allowable and what we could be putting into an RFP. So I'm in the midst of creating that document right now, and then those parents in the committee, because there's one from every school, will be able to incorporate comments that they're hearing from their school and we'll put them in that doc to be evaluated. So that way we can include in the RFP what we really want to have in there.
Great.
So it's an ongoing process, but there's a little bit of time, and so I have to kind of balance, but yeah, that's good.
Okay.
We're working
No,
on it.
yeah, there's so much on your plate as we've been hearing today.
I was just going to say, Michael, to highlight all the work Carol does, we also had a safety committee meeting, which
Okay.
Carol chaired.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness,
Maura and
Carol.
I attended that, but it was my first time, so we might as well just go down the Carol run of what else you accomplished these last couple of
I didn't
weeks.
have to do much work, because the police really ran that
I
one.
thought that was great. So it was my first time attending. I don't know if you were, it was yours first time as well. So it was nice to see that at the safety committee meeting that we had not only Tulin, but also the chief. So Carol used the time wisely to actually ask for some input, not only from the teachers and others who were in attendance, but also from the police department in terms of security, and buildings and grounds, what you'd look for, what are some of your interests, just to use the time wisely to talk about upcoming budget. And so they gave us some of their contributions. But I thought the meeting was well run, and we got some good input from them.
Thank you. All right, going once, twice.
Anything else Carol did this week? It's just to highlight, we don't want you doing foils and other things.
We thank each of you. So our next public meeting will be after the break on Tuesday, March 6th, and as we heard, it'll be a presentation on budget matters related to curriculum and instruction. Promises to be a good one. I don't know if it'll be as well attended, but this evening's was. But we thank everyone who did come. And we are going to move into an executive session for the purposes of discussing employment history of particular persons and also matters related to negotiation.
And pending litigation.
So thank you, everyone. Oh, can I have a motion to go into executive session?
So
All in
Second.
favor? Aye. All right, we'll take a 5-minute break.
Yes, and then pending litigation. So I'm going to have Gail here.